Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, the CISO's Guide to Cyber Resilience, Best Practices, and Pitfalls to Avoid. I'm Shilpa Goswami, and I'll be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, the session will be in listen only mode and will last for an hour, out of which last 15 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar to organizers or our speakers, use the Q&A window. Also, if you face any audio video challenges, please check your internet connection or you may log out and log in again. Our speaker for today's session, Mark Houpt. He is the Chief Information Security Officer at DataBank, boasting over 3 decades of expertise in information security and technology across diverse industries. He became a part of DataBank in 2017 following the acquisition of Edge Hosting, where he has served as CISO since 2015. His leadership role encompasses strategic planning, security oversight, compliance, and contributing his deep subject matter knowledge to an integrated information security program. Regarded as a renowned security blogger, podcaster, and entrepreneur, Mark has undertaken an expensive professional journey from safeguarding Fortune 50 financial institutions and healthcare entities and acting as a CTO in higher education to being a cryptologist with the US Navy. His impressive list of certifications include CISSP, CCSP, CEH, V9, CHFI, and more. Mark expertise particularly shines in comprehending and translating complex regulations like FedRAMP, FISMA, CMMC, HIPAA, GDPR, and PCI DSS for clients. His qualification match the demanding standards of multiple DoD positions, and he is an active member in leading global security organizations. Outside of his professional realm, Mark is dedicated philanthropist helping ensure economic security for those in need and is passionate aviation and wildlife photographer. Together with his wife Maria, they share 3 grown children. For more on Mark, refer to his LinkedIn profile. At DataBank, he proudly leads a team of expert security architects and compliance engineers. Without any further delay, I would hand over the session to you, Mark.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and it's my pleasure to join you today at EC Council University. And what we're going to do is get started, jump straight in with just understanding what we're going to do in this webinar. So we've already talked about the introductions, but we're going to make sure that we understand exactly what cyber resilience is, what the role of the CISO or any security professional would be in cyber resilience, some of the best practices, and then how to craft and deploy a strategy, and then the things to watch out for. So let's just jump straight into understanding this cyber resilience scenario. So the word resilience itself just really speaks to being able to overcome and recover from difficulties in our lives or whatever that resilience piece may be applying to. But when we apply that specifically to cyber resilience, we're looking to help our organizations overcome and continually deliver what we expect out of our IT systems and our cybersecurity systems in particular. So in our current digital age, it's becoming more and more important for us to ensure that cyber resilience is a part of cybersecurity and a significant part of cybersecurity because of the extensive threats that exist out there and the intertwining of data and IT systems like we've never had before. So in the past, we've had situations where there have been standalone systems and the resilience of those was handled through disaster recovery plans or backup plans. But now that our systems are intertwined, where, for example, a system from one company may rely upon and interact with the system from another company, we now need to take into account much larger potential disruption scenarios, or even consider the compromise of multiple data sources in that resilience process. And especially if you're in finance or in healthcare or any other type of industry like that, where you're gathering data from multiple sources and bringing it together. Those are some considering those are areas that we need to really think about cyber resilience. How is your application, how is your business going to continue to operate relying upon data from multiple sources, multiple applications that all come together in one pane of glass, if you will, on your computer screen? So let's take a look at why that cyber resilience is important beyond what resilience is. You know, it's that rapid transformation, that rapid digital transformation, and that reliance that I was just speaking about on disparate systems across the world and across whatever nation or even corporation that you might be in. So this rapid digital transformation, especially with artificial intelligence, has a larger impact when it goes down. You know, when we see a company or when we see a system go down, let's say, for example, with a data center operator that has impact upon multiple companies, that type of thing hits the news. When we see a ransomware attack against a healthcare entity, for example, we see how that trickles down and impacts other scenarios as well. So these interconnected systems that we have today are highly impacted by either a resilience plan or the lack thereof. And a single breach in one system can quickly cascade and making that resilience not just local, but a global problem. So the other factor that we have to look at with resilience is regulatory compliance. I was talking to a friend just a couple of days ago during another presentation where we were talking about how just 10 years ago, regulatory compliance was really within very specific industries and was typically governed within that industry. So for example, with PCI DSS or with HIPAA, it was very focused on healthcare data or very focused on just the payment card industry and the collection of that payment card data within the industry and the protection of that data within the industry. But now we're seeing, and I would add that those regulations like PCI DSS were a self-governed scenario. Well, now we're starting to see with GDPR and a lot of other privacy regulations where the government entities are now enforcing cybersecurity resilience and cybersecurity onto corporations and making significant fines as well as government impacts upon those. So regulatory compliance across all industries, they now face stringent regulations around the data protection and privacy that exists out there. And the other scenario here, a couple of other scenarios we have is the economic continuity. You know, if we have a system that goes down, that, for example, if a large payment processor goes down and cannot continue on processing credit card data, then all of a sudden you could have multiple impacts at the individual customer level inside of a store. So we can use this, for example, if you have a grocery store or you have a large what we call here in the United States big box stores like a Walmart or another type of organization like that has a lot of product within it. If the payment card system goes down in one of those stores or across their entire system, you could have economic impact across everything. And you could have economic impact at local levels as well as at national levels or even international levels by the problems that exist without the resiliency in place. And then, of course, we have reputation management. How many times do we see that there are companies that have negative marks against them because of the fact that they were not able to keep their systems up and running? So all of these things factor in why cyber resilience is important. And if we think about how Simon Sinek talks about the golden circle. The why we do these things is more important than what we do sometimes, because we put the passion into correcting the problems when we understand and we know the why. So now that we know the why, let's take a look at why it is, or what we're going to do, the significance of cyber resilience in protecting these organizations. So what cyber resilience does is it allows us to prepare our organizations in advance to face any sort of cyber threats that might exist. That is the key function. If there's anything that you get out of this conversation today, know that cyber resilience is a preparation in order to be out there and ready for the type of things that exist. And inside of the security environment, as a CISO who's been doing this for 30 plus years, one of the things we always say about cyber attacks, it's not if, but when it will happen. We don't walk around thinking, well, maybe it might happen or it could happen. We're walking around thinking, when is it going to happen? When is something going to jump out in front of us and cause that cybersecurity attack to occur? When is the next threat actor going to come at us, whether legitimately or illegitimately? When are we going to get caught up in some of the various international geopolitics type of scenarios, just simply because of where we live or who perhaps our customers might be? So cyber resilience is going to prepare our organizations to deal with those head on, upfront, without waiting for them to happen. So we're going to be responding rather than reacting. A lot of times when we go into the doctor for a physical or for a checkup, the doctor may have us sit on the edge of a table or on the edge of a chair, and he'll take this little tool and he'll knock on our knees, and our knee will automatically jerk up. That is a reaction. That's an uncontrolled type of scenario, and that's why the doctor is testing you, because he wants to know if your nervous system is reacting appropriately, if it's an automatic knee-jerk reaction. But in cybersecurity and with cyber resilience, we want to have a planned, we want to have a controlled response to these types of things. We don't want to just simply react to what's going on. So if we have that cyber resilience in place, what will that benefit our organizations? Well, it's going to minimize our immediate financial impact, because what will happen is, if we plan for this in advance, number one, it will put protections in place. Number two, it will put training in place so that we don't have to rush out and figure out how to do things. We'll already have tools in place. We'll already have processes in place to handle that. So we will be able to minimize the financial impact upon our organization, because our response will be directed, deliberate, and very deafening to the attacker that's coming in. They will be stopped in their tracks if we have cyber resilience properly in place. The other thing is, it will allow us to be strategically aligned with the rest of our business, or get the business to be strategically aligned with us. And so when our business understands the importance of cyber resilience and understands the risks that are out there to our business, we can all come together and move forward in one direction and understanding how to proceed with that. Another thing that's very important is the concept of mitigating security risks and protecting our reputation and investor relations. These all kind of go together, in the sense that, mitigating risks doesn't mean that it will go away. What it means is it will reduce the risk, and our investors and our reputation engines that are out there like to see that when we are working effectively to reduce our risk, they're going to have more confidence in us, and investors are going to invest more so in us. Other things that cyber resilience allows us to do is protect our intellectual property, and intellectual property theft right now is a significant problem out there. And then ever since COVID, the buzzwords that we've heard is supply chain problems, and being cyber resilient will allow that strategic alignment with our organization to understand what the risks are in the supply chain, how to overcome those, and how to deal with those. And then finally, it will empower our employees, and will give our employees a sense of of understanding and confidence inside of our organizations that they don't have to be part of the next downsize or the next reduction in force, because we've already thought about strategic alignment. We've thought about minimizing the financial impact of these types of situations on our organization, and that will allow us to sustain our employees, not if, but when our organizations are attacked. So what does the threat landscape look like right now? How are, what's out there that could be a risk to being cyber resilient in our world right now? So I think it's very clear from a lot of people, a lot of organizations, that the number of sophisticated, not just number of cyber attacks, but the number of sophisticated cyber attacks is alarming at this point. And a lot of that really stems back to prior to COVID. During COVID, we saw that, and the situations where people were locked up in their homes and they didn't have a lot to do. We saw people were reaching out, if you will. They were solving their alone time problem, if you will, by learning how to do new cyber activities so that they could possibly do work while they were locked up. And so we saw a lot of people filling their time by learning how to do cyber attacks, and that has raised the overall risk, and it has raised the overall problem of cyber resilience. But even since then, we've also seen an escalation in geopolitical issues in Eastern Europe, in Asia, and now in the Middle East, that have caused organizations and national infrastructure to be very concerned about the more sophisticated types of attacks, especially around malware and ransomware. And ransomware is the one that's in the news. And then in the past year, we've had a significant increase in artificial intelligence, or at least the use of artificial intelligence inside of cyber attacks. Now, I will tell you that it is my firm belief that artificial intelligence itself cannot generate an attack, but what it does is it amplifies the attack. What that means is this: that artificial intelligence still requires that a human being were to sit down at that artificial intelligence platform, if you will, and tell it what to do and tell it when to do it, perhaps, or under what conditions to do it. But what the artificial intelligence will do is it will far outreach the capacity of one or even a group of individuals to align and carry out and execute the attacks. And so it will amplify those attacks. So whereas one or two individuals, or maybe a group of individuals that are doing ransomware attacks previously had been able to attack one or two hospitals, for example, in a matter of a week, now they can attack a whole series of hospitals, because they can program the artificial intelligence to go out and do some of the things that are necessary. And as I mentioned, we have the geopolitical issues that are out there right now, the state-sponsored attacks, or those that are in response to state-sponsored attacks, are significant threats that we have inside the environment now. As nations war against nations, not only will it be those nations attacking one another or their proxy nations attacking one another, but you could also have people who live in those nations, or perhaps people who are sympathetic to those nations, jumping into the fray, jumping into the situation and taking it upon themselves to then attack organizations that are aligned with their supposed enemy. So for example, here in the United States, just in the past week, we have seen attacks against even fast food chains, just because certain individuals or certain groups believe that those fast food chains may have been more supportive of one side or the other during some of the recent geopolitical issues. So we're seeing that type of thing be very, very prolific. And I think we all know that cloud vulnerabilities and phishing and social engineering, IoT devices, all those vulnerabilities that exist inside of those, there are people that are out threat hunting, and there are people out hunting for those vulnerabilities in order to take advantage of them. And so those are what's the evolving threat landscape right now. Now, don't sit on that and think, okay, well, I've gotten a great briefing on this and that's what I have to look for. Reality is this threat landscaping is constantly evolving. And if we were to come back and talk about this again in January or again in April or even next summer, that landscape will have significantly changed by what's out there. So keep that in mind and consider always keeping up on those threat landscapes. But threat landscape is only part of it. Now, what about the impacts that are occurring? Well, these impacts are pretty stagnant, actually, if you want the truth. All of those evolving threats that we just talked about are right now these impacts that we've seen in our economy and inside of our environment have been the same impacts that I would have told you about a year ago or even 5 years ago. Frankly, the economic cost of the impact when a ransomware attack occurs against a healthcare institution, it's not just the healthcare institution that has to pay for that, but there's also the law enforcement impact and the money and the time and effort they have to put into that. There is the money and the time and effort that is put in by a local economy where that hospital is at, because for example, elective surgeries may not be able to occur, or perhaps an individual cannot get the health care they need, which then causes them to have to go elsewhere and take their money to a different hospital in order to get the health care that they need. So these economic costs are high, but they continue to go on. And again, these are the same things I would have talked about 5 years ago. Operational disruption. Anytime, I remember in over 20 years ago, 1 week after 9/11/2001, which was of course very impactful here in the United States, there was a virus that came out, was called NIMDA, which is admin backwards. And the company that I worked for, we had to shut the doors and send our employees home while we fought that virus for over 2 days. So the operational disruption to an organization that gets hit by a virus, malware, ransomware, things along those lines is not something new. This goes back for years and years and years. And so my point in sharing the impacts with you is that although the threats are evolving, you have to continually watch for the threats. The impact upon your organization comes down to being the same thing, regardless of whether it's the NIMDA virus in 2001 or the ransomware gang that's out there attacking you today. Now, data breaches also have economic impacts, and those are issues that are significant today as well. Compliance and legal issues. Of any of the things listed on here, the compliance and legal issues is the one that's on the rise, because we, as I described in an earlier slide, we are having more and more government involvement in the regulatory aspects of things that are out there. Now, one of the things that is sort of new, or is rising, if you will, is the psychological and social impact upon an individual as a result of the threats that exist out there. Now, they have always existed, but people today get more anxious over these types of things, and because of social media, respond and react to the attacks that may impact them, their economic situation, or them individually, much different today than what we saw 10 or even 15, 20 years ago. Things now go out on social media and they share their feelings about it. So the psychological and social impact, the fear of losing their job because of the operational disruption, the fear of what will happen because a piece of data is now exposed that should have been kept secret, things along those types of that type of thing is what we're talking about with social impact. So that is something that although none of these are new and they're constant, there are some that have risen to the top at different times, and the compliance and legal issues and the psychological and social impact are significant right now. All right, so what is the role of the CISO in cyber resilience? Well, again, 10 or 15 years ago, the role of cyber resilience from a CISO's perspective was very much a subordinate role. The CISO would take the subordinate aspect to whatever the chief technology officer or the chief information officer of the company directed them to do, because lots of CISOs reported to the CTO and CIO. And now the CISO himself or herself has been elevated to a peer level with the CTO and CIO. And so now we as CISOs need to take a more responsible role in cyber resilience. And we need to be the ones that are out there leading and developing the strategy and the policies and plans that are associated with that. So a lot of CTOs and CIOs have shifted that responsibility over to the CISO, where that had not been in the past. So what you need to do if you are a CISO or inside of a cybersecurity unit is you need to be developing your policies and your plans and being out there and in front leading the scenario, because other parts of your organization are expecting you to do that. Now, with that, they're also looking for you to develop the budget and conduct the risk assessments that will lead to the definition of what cyber resilience is within your organization. So you need to be looking at what are the threats to your organization, what are the impacts upon your organization, and what are the levels of impact upon your organization, so that you can then communicate a risk management plan, which will lead into your budget, your policies, and your leadership and strategy. Now, that's the upward management of the CISO inside of cyber resilience, but there is also an outward scenario with the communications, where you need to be having and making sure that awareness and training exists throughout your entire organization when it comes to cyber resilience. It is our responsibility as CISOs to make sure that people understand exactly what the threats are and the impacts are, so they can help us be able to defend these types of organizations. And that's what we're talking about with future proofing, is making sure that you have the right tools and the right policies and procedures and everything in place to deal with, as well as the communication and the awareness and training to deal with what may happen to your organization in the future. So if we want to dive down even further as CISOs, what are some of the best practices that we need to do to put in place these strategies to be the leader in cyber resilience? So first and foremost, we just started talking about a little bit. We need to regularly update and train our people on what cyber resilience is and what it means to our organization. We need to share with people in our organization a summary, maybe not full details, but a summary of what our risks are. They need to understand what the risks are, because if you're not teaching the support person or your cloud team, or perhaps even your accounts payable team, what exactly is the risk within your organization that they deal with, they're not paying attention to it, and they are not going to be helping you achieve your goals of being a leader in this and strategically moving in that direction. The other thing we need to do is make sure that we have good and effective incident response plans. So this is part of future proofing, and this is part of looking at what can I do to respond rather than react to a situation. By having an incident response plan in place and conducting the training and drills on that plan, so people know how to respond in the situation when there is an attack or a threat to our cyber resilience, will allow the situation to go more smoothly. So make sure that you have developed and trained, and I stress that, and training, or that drilling part, your incident response plan. Now, you cannot create these types of plans in a vacuum. You must collaborate and share that information, not only the risk to the organization that I talked about a moment ago, but the actual plans and the actual understanding of what we mean inside of our organization about cyber resilience. You need to have that awareness be an over-encompassing factor within your program. And then through that, people will adopt the advanced security tools and processes that they need in order to be resilient within their organization. So for example, by having training and doing the incident response plans and drills and collaborating and sharing of information and risk management data, you could have somebody, for example, inside of your accounts payable team, as they're looking for a new piece of software, be more concerned about whether that data is backed up, whether or not there's high availability that exists on the application, or possibly how the data is secured within the application. So you can have the adoption of these advanced security tools and processes, not just on your own team in the security team, but also throughout the organization. All right, so let's dive down even further on this. So you can see every single time we go, we're going a little bit deeper, a little bit farther into this. But we're going to look at how to craft and deploy the cyber resilience strategy. All right. So now that we've decided that we want to share our information, we want to collaborate, we want to be an organization-wide scenario, and the CISO is going to lead that. The CISO needs to step up and show what the strategy is. Now, what I'm providing you here is just an example. It may be different within your organization and important to be different within your organization. So the first step is you want to assess the organization for readiness and risk. You want to understand what the risks are within your organization, and you want to understand how open your people are and your organization is business-wise to cyber resilience, because that will determine exactly where you engage and how you engage with training, with awareness, with budget, everything. So if your organization is already highly functional in regards to cyber resilience, let's say you're the new CISO that came in, or maybe you've done a great job as a CISO and people already know what cyber resilience is, then maybe you just need to start by identifying what the new risks are, or perhaps the long-term risks have been identified, and you want to now step up that program. But if you don't have a good program in place, then you need to go all the way back and start teaching people exactly what cyber resilience is. So that's your step one. Step two is identify the security requirements and the business requirements that are associated with this, and then properly allocate your resources. So you may need to realign part of your team, or perhaps through collaboration, ask another team to realign their people to meet the security requirements of the cyber resilience plan. And then step three is incorporating that resilience into the entire organizational structure. So this is and culture. So this is where an awareness program and a lot of training, this is where the drills come into place that we were talking about earlier. And then once you've been through that for a year, so steps 1, 2, and 3 will be in year 1. Step 4 will be where you start doing continuous improvement, and that's where you start going back to step 1, 2, and 3 and reassessing and adding new layers on, adding new types of requirements, adding new security or new training as you go in. Go deeper in the training. So for example, if you have a company that doesn't know what cyber resilience is, has never dealt with it before, your first year, you're just going to be teaching and making them aware of what cyber resilience is, putting in basic requirements. But on year 2, now you're going to dive down deeper, and you're going to bring more people into your incident response drills. You're going to, for example, maybe your first year, you only do incident response with the leader of the support team, or your front end customer service team. But now you move in and you actually have people on year 2 and year 3 that are on the support, the front lines, the tier 1 techs, doing part of the incident response plan. So that would be the good plan. Step 1 is assess. Step 2 is identify the requirements and resources. Step 3 is incorporating that into the entire organizational culture. And then step 4 is go back and do it all again and up the ante, if you will, up the requirements, up the environment. So once we do that, how are we going to deploy this? Once we build that plan, I should say, how are we going to deploy that? Well, one of the key things from a security perspective we want to do is we want to have data. And so we're going to do a vulnerability assessment with tools like Nessus, or we're going to hire a penetration tester to come in and show us exactly what's going on out there, show us where our risks are at and where our weaknesses are at. We're also going to make sure, in that collaborative piece, we're going to make sure that patching and updates occur for all of our software and all of our pieces. And then we're going to also be looking at threat surveillance and detection capabilities. So we're going to be teaching our teams how to find security issues. I've always told people that security is like a sixth sense. We want to feel security. We want to be able to just detect it because it's around us. And doing that surveillance and that threat detection, teaching people how to do that will be extra sensors, if you will, out there for the security team to be able to identify when there's issues. And one of the biggest things we want to do right now is really be looking at third-party risk management, especially with supply chain going on, things along those supply chain risks going on. Those are the types of things we want to deal with very heavily right now, because one of these third parties that has an attack going on against it could have impact upon our environment. We've seen that going all the way back to 2014 with the Target attack. They had a very the Target shopping retail stores inside the United States and elsewhere in the world. They had a third party that shut down their entire payment management system because of an attack that came in through the back door. And we want to deal with those. And interestingly enough is that people still haven't learned the lessons from that. And every time we turn around, these ransomware attacks, a lot of them come in through third party risks that exist. All right, so a couple of pitfalls that we want to avoid in cyber resilience, and make sure that that we're doing things right. So we do not want to neglect a culture of security awareness. We can't just bottle this information up and say, oh, it's only the security team's responsibility. We have to share this out and make sure the entire company is aware of our need to be cyber resilient. And going back to that concept of Simon Sinek's golden circle and the why, we need to teach people within our organizations why cybersecurity resilience is important to them and their job. The next thing is, do not neglect your incident response plan. Again, I talked about the difference between reaction and response. Your incident response plan, if properly trained against, if properly drilled, if properly written down, will allow you to respond. It will save you time, it will save you money, and it will save you the impact upon your organization if it's done properly. But if you have no plan or you neglect your plan, you will be reacting. It will cost your organization money. There will be chaos during an incident, and there will be heads that roll, as we say, because people will get fired over not properly managing the incident situation. And if you're the CISO and you're failing to be the leader and align cyber resilience to the business objectives of the organization, then you probably are not going to be the CISO very long. So if you're not collaborating and taking into consideration the resilience needs of all the other business entities within the organization, then your business may not even exist very long. There have been many businesses that have been shut down because of ransomware, because they can't recover from the cost of it, because nobody aligned the cyber resilience with the business objectives. They failed to reach out to the other business department owners and said, hey, what should we be backing up? What should we do to ensure that if X, Y, and Z happens, that we can come back into business, even if we're only out for 2 days or 3 days? What can we do to recover from that? And in this type of world right now, you cannot ignore the evolving threat landscape. You cannot say, hey, I went to a webinar on November 10th with Mark Houpt, and he gave me a whole list of threats that are out there, and that will carry on and exist for 6 or 8 months. You need to constantly be aware of what's going on in the environment, where the attacks are coming from. I get daily threat briefs on what's happening in the environment from many of my vendors, such as Radware and Trend Micro, because those types of organizations have extensive intelligence collection capabilities. I get told about DDoS attacks, for example, that are happening against organizations that never hit the news, or that will hit the news days later, that I'm now prepared for, because these types of organizations have helped me get prepared for it. And then, as we've talked about, don't overlook the supply chain in the third party scenario. Too many companies have overlooked that and then been reliant upon a particular piece of product that comes in, for example, a generator or a part for a generator, a part for a manufacturing process, and then the supply chain gets disrupted, they go down, their entire business is incapable of operating because that one small part isn't there. So keep an eye on your third party risks. Do not neglect that as well. All right, well, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it back over to Shilpa for the Q&A and the poll that's going to be. So I'll take a quick breath, and you guys ask me your questions.
Thank you very much, Mark, for such an informative session, and our attendees share the same sentiments. If you're interested to learn more about our programs, do let us know in the poll that's going to be conducted now. Let us know your preferred mode of training and we will reach out to you soon. So Mark, shall we start with the Q&A?
Yes, please.
Okay. So our first question is cyber resilience based on business impact analysis or information risk management?
So can you say that one again, please?
Yes. Is cyber resiliency based on business impact analysis or information risk management?
Oh, that's a great question. Is it based upon business impact or risk? And you know what? Honestly, I think it's both, because you need to understand your risks and you need to marry that up with how those risks impact your business. So doing a understanding what your threats are, understanding what your risks are to the business, and then conducting a business impact analysis on multiple aspects of your business. So for example, you may do a risk analysis on a particular manufacturing process within your organization, and then you do a business impact analysis. What would it look like if that manufacturing process, that line, let's say you included a supply chain risk inside of there, in that part for the machine that creates the widget is not available to you for 2 months or for even 2 weeks. How does that impact your whole business? Does your business have an ability because they have enough supply inside of your warehouse to continue to supply the people that you are doing business with, or are you going to create a backlog inside of your organization? So I believe these two are very closely married up, and I don't believe that one is more important than the other.
Thank you, Mark, for answering that question. Our next question is, what should be CISO's perspective towards IoT security and even OT security?
Yeah. So what should be the CISO's perspective on IoT or OT security? And I think that depends on the business that you're in. Some businesses rely more on OT or even IoT, but I think every single CISO should be concerned about those IoT devices, especially the ones that people will bring into the office that you may not be aware of. There's many things that come into the office. So for example, a lot of businesses have a break room or a lunch room, or perhaps even they're large enough where they have a cafeteria and they've hired out that cafeteria service to a provider to create lunches or to create snacks and things like that for their employees to purchase. And those break rooms or even the cafeteria, they may bring in a refrigerator that has an IoT device on it, and then they want to plug that into your network. You should be very concerned about that, and very careful, because number one, you don't know and don't control the device, and second of all, you're not updating that device. So all those factors are very concerning to a business and can be that back door that comes in. But every single business has to evaluate it differently. You may be in a business where none of that type of stuff exists. And in my business, I write policies about IoT and OT. In our business, OT is our building management systems, and we have become very, very concerned about them, especially with some recent, within the last month to 6 weeks, significant attacks of ransomware against the building management system software developers. And so we are now concerned that maybe we're not impacted today, but 6 months when they do an update, much like the SolarWinds situation, we don't know what kind of backdoors may have been put into that building management system, that OT device, that we have to watch out for. So we are constantly watching out for that, and every business has to address that differently.
Thank you, Mark, for answering that question. Our next question is, what is the difference between incident response and cyber resilience when we are talking about preparation?
So incident response is a function of cyber resilience. So think about cyber resilience as the overarching umbrella that has a lot of vertical things underneath it that you need to do. And incident response is just one of them. Patching of systems is another vertical. Security awareness and training is another vertical that's under the umbrella of cyber resilience. Even managing a budget and developing a leadership strategy for cyber resilience is another vertical that's underneath there. So your incident response is an individual vertical that goes underneath the umbrella.
Thank you, Mark, for answering that question. We'll take last two questions for the day.
Okay.
What appropriate action should be taken when users repeatedly make same mistakes even after conducting multiple trainings on cyber awareness?
So was the question what should people do even after they've already done multiple training and multiple awareness on cyber resilience?
I'll just repeat the question.
Okay.
What appropriate action should be taken when users repeatedly make same mistake even after
Oh,
conducting multiple on cyber awareness?
yeah. Okay. So what should an organization do when somebody is continually making mistakes, even though they've been trained? So we have something inside of our HR policy, and many companies have these, and you should have one as well, which is what's called a sanctions policy. When someone is continually making mistakes, one of the things that you need to do as a CISO is conduct a risk assessment on that individual and understand whether they are doing these things by what we call omission or commission. And commission means it's deliberate. It means they're just ignoring your training. They don't care. They're just out, or perhaps even deliberately trying to circumvent your security. Whereas omission means they just forget, they don't understand, and so on and so forth. So if the person is doing these by commission, means they're deliberately not paying attention, not doing, not and continually doing mistakes and continually putting your organization at risk, then the sanctions policy comes into play, and your collaboration with HR comes into play, where you can write them up, do what we call a performance improvement plan that could lead to, if they don't correct their actions, termination from the organization. In fact, if the risk is high enough, some of the things that you may consider are suspending the person from work until they get the point and they stop, they agreed to not make mistakes anymore, or even letting them go. Now, if the act is of omission, in other words, they're not deliberately doing it, they are forgetting or they're not understanding, then perhaps taking it to the level of doing one-on-one training with the individual and trying to understand what it is that they're not getting, what it is that they are continually making the mistake on, and try and help them through that. And then if the person just can't get it, they just cognitively, they don't understand it, they can't get it, then perhaps you do need to find them a different role, or perhaps manage them out of your environment, because we cannot accept either deliberately or through just natural mistakes, we cannot accept the risk of continual problems that impact the resiliency of our cyber programs anymore.
Thank you, Mark, for answering that question. Our last question for the day: should business companies invite penetration testers to scan their system every year or 2 years to prevent breaches?
Okay, so should people conduct penetration testing and other types of vulnerability testing either 1 year or every 2 years? Actually, PCI DSS requires you to do that twice a year. So my answer to that is I would definitely do it at least once a year, but there are regulations or standards that are out there that require you to do it more than once a year. So it all comes down to what is the business impact upon your organization, what is your assessment of compliance requirements within your organization, but I would not let it go more than 1 year. You should be doing penetration testing at least on an annual basis, and frankly, you should be doing vulnerability assessments. With tools, with security tools, probably, PCI requires at least quarterly. I would say at least monthly. And in my organization, we do those on a monthly basis.
Thank you again to our wonderful speaker, Mark, for answering those questions and for the great presentation and knowledge shared with our global audiences. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you. Before we conclude the webinar, Mark, would you like to give a small message to our audiences, please?
Yeah, well, thank you for allowing me to come and be a part of this, and I very much appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions, just reach out and be happy to continue the dialogue.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your message to our audiences. Before we end the session, I would like to announce our next CyberTalk session, a practical guide to building a career in cybersecurity, which is scheduled for November 17, 2023. This is an expert presentation by Irene Copper. To register for this session, please do go visit our website www.eccu.edu/cybertalk. The link is given in the chat section. Hope to see you all on November 17th. With this, we end the session. You may now disconnect your lines. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.